listed. You have them through your app. But now I would like to take the great pleasure of introducing my very, very good friend, the Honorable Marco Zanni, member of the European Parliament representing Italy. Marco is one of the great leaders, young emerging leaders of Europe. And I have enormous confidence in him and the clear thinking that he brings to issues, particularly of national security. So, Marco, we are grateful to have you today, and we look forward to your remarks.
Buenas tardes,
Good afternoon, everyone.
Robert, for your kind presentation and for your strong effort in organizing such a beautiful forum where we are discussing very important topics for our future, because this is the future. And today I'm going to talk about a very important issue that is cybersecurity, and with the other panelists we will discuss about this topic. And I will try to give you an European perspective on this topic. And as you know, in the past 20 years, the world has experienced an impressive increase in technological development. People, businesses, and nations are becoming interconnected, and every aspect of our lives is strongly dependent from technology. In such a complex environment, cybersecurity is one of the most important challenges we are facing, especially considering the following very sensitive aspects: national security, military defense, protection of critical infrastructures, and protection of our financial system. All the modern liberal democracies are strongly dependent from the above-mentioned critical aspects and the technologies associated to them. Sorry for my voice. Sectors such as transport, energy, health, and finance have become increasingly dependent on digital technologies to run their core businesses. While digitalization brings enormous opportunities and provides solutions for many of the challenges we face today, not least during the COVID-19 crisis, it also exposes the economy and society to cyber threats. For these reasons, modern geopolitics has become more focused on increasing cybersecurity to protect national security. The challenge of cybersecurity is constantly evolving together with the technological advancement of the modern society. The more our society is interconnected, the more cybersecurity should be considered a strategic priority for every nation. Cyber attacks and cybercrime are increasing in number and sophistication across the world. This trend is set to grow further in the future, given that almost 30 billion devices worldwide are expected to be linked to the IoT, Internet of Things, by 2024. In this regard, I would like to analyze, as I said, this topic from an European perspective. So, starting from the past, due to wrong policies pursued in the past, the European Union and its member states were not able to invest properly in protecting themselves from hostile cyber attacks. In the past years, many analysts pointed out how cybersecurity loopholes are one of the main concerns for the European Union security. Increasing cybersecurity to protect strategic and critical infrastructures will become even more important when the European Recovery Fund, that is the EU response to the COVID-19 economic crisis, will be deployed starting from the second half of 2021. In fact, the EU has committed at least 20% of the 750 billion envelope of the fund to digital transition and transformation. This means people, public administration, companies, and political authorities in the EU will become even more digitalized and vulnerable to cyber attacks. In recent years, the EU institutions started to take some action to increase cybersecurity. In 2019, the Council of the European Union established a framework that allows the EU to impose restrictive measures aimed at deterring and countering cyber attacks that pose a threat to the European Union itself or its member states, including cyber attacks against third countries or international organizations. The European Union Agency for Cybersecurity that was established in 2004 was strengthened to deal more efficiently with cyber attacks. This agency now is helping the EU and member states to be better equipped and prepared to prevent, detect, and react to cybersecurity problems. A few weeks ago, also my home country, Italy, decided to set the stage for the creation of a similar agency at the national level that will be in charge of national cybersecurity. The coordination between the national and the supranational levels will be fundamental in determining the success of an integrated European cybersecurity strategy. Those steps are clearly not enough, but this is a first attempt to establish a coordinated framework at the European level to tackle this strategic issue. To summarize, the EU 2020 Action Plan to address cybersecurity challenges based on mainly 6 pillars. The first one is enhance cyber resilience. Then we have fight cybercrime, boost cyber diplomacy, as we call it, reinforce cyber defense, boost, and this is fundamental, research and development capabilities, and protect critical infrastructure, both digital and physical. The aim of the new EU strategy is to strengthen Europe's resilience against cyber threats and ensure that all citizens and business can fully benefit from trustworthy and reliable services and digital tools. The new strategy contains concrete proposals for deploying regulatory, investment, and policy instruments on cybersecurity. Today, the EU is working on 2 legislative proposals to address current and future online and offline risks. The first proposal is a review of the EU directive on the security of network and information system that was introduced in 2016 as the first ever EU-wide legislation measure with the purpose of increasing cooperation between member states on the vital issue of cybersecurity. It laid down security obligation for operators of essential services, such as in critical sectors such as energy, transport, health, and finance, and for digital services providers. The second step that will come in the second half of 2021 is a new EU directive on the resilience of critical entities when we talk about cybersecurity. Another important step taken by the EU was the establishment, and this is very important in my opinion, of an EU-wide sanctions framework against cyber attacks. In the recent years, EU and member states were targeted by cyber attacks from hostile countries. So in May 2019, the European Council, so the prime ministers and presidents of the member states, established a framework which allows the EU to impose targeted sanctions to deter and respond to cyber attacks, which constitutes an external threat to the EU or its member states. More specifically, this framework allows the EU, for the first time in history, to impose sanctions on persons or entities that are responsible for cyber attacks or attempted cyber attacks, who provide financial, technical, or material support for such attacks, or just who are involved in other ways in cyber attacks. Sanctions may also be imposed on other persons or entities associated with them. So it's a broad framework for sanctions on cyber attacks. Restrictive measures also include a ban on persons traveling to the EU and an asset freeze on persons and entities. The first ever sanctions for cyber attacks were imposed on July 30, 2020, so it started working properly since the last year. The last important step taken at the EU level was the improvement of its cyber defense capabilities, and this is also a very important issue since many of the EU countries are also members of the North Atlantic Alliance and are setting up more coordination in defense with the establishment of the European Defense Funds in 2019. As already pointed out, cyberspace is considered as the fifth domain of warfare, as critical to military operation. It is a domain encompassing everything from information and telecommunication networks, infrastructure, and the day-to-day support to computer system processors and controllers. The European Defence Agency, in cooperation with the EU Cybersecurity Agency and Europol, supports member states in building a skilled military cyber defense workforce and ensures the availability of proactive and reactive cyber defense technology. EU cyber defense coordination, cooperation, and capabilities are three areas targeted by the European Commission right now for future development, and I'm sure other proposals to set or to improve the framework on cyber defense will come by the end of this term in 2024. To conclude, as I said, I try to present a broad, even if not exhaustive, overview of how the EU is dealing with cybersecurity and the threats related. However, I think that EU alone will not be able to tackle successfully the cybersecurity challenge. Atlantic cooperation and the role of NATO will be fundamental in addressing the challenges we are discussing today, and also other panelists before me discussed. Illiberal democracies such as China or Russia are increasingly using cyber attacks as a modern and efficient warfare tool, threatening our security and our way of life. Increasing and strengthening the Atlantic cooperation, coordination, research, and investment capabilities in this field is the only way will liberal democracies have to preserve security and stability worldwide. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm looking forward to reply to your question, if any.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Scott Taylor, former member of Congress, very adept on these issues. Thank you, Your Honorable, for being with us today, and if you're taking this time to make this trip.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here in Panama once again. I will be speaking in English today.
It's an honor to be with folks like Presidente Cortizo, Senator Cassidy, Senator Rubio, Senator Pizarro, Congresista Casillero, and my great colleague, of course, Congressman Pittenger, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen from all over South and Central America and Europe and beyond. It's good to be with you and this prestigious panel here in Panama. It's been quite a while. It wasn't too many years ago that I was here in this country with the U.S. military, training with the Panamanian Special Forces, and living in a hammock not too far from here in the jungle. I can tell you that my hotel room is a lot more comfortable. I do have very fond memories of Panama and its wonderful people, and it's good to be back. I want to say before I start that I'm super proud of my former colleague, Congressman Pittenger. Proud of your hard work on these very important issues and your partners who have helped to put this forum together and to marshal our collective minds and make a real difference. Given the experts here today who are speaking on things like 5G and illicit trade, cyber, financial crimes, transnational criminal and terror organizations, I wish to continue with what Marco led on and speak today about the broader policy and political issues that affect the globe and the potential of world conflict, especially given the fact that our panel is on defense and infrastructure and things of this nature, and the convergence of criminal, terrorism, and rogue state actors in cyberspace has created national security issues for all of us and our countries. We are at a historical juncture where our defense platforms Information networks, critical infrastructure, and response systems are becoming increasingly digitized. This creates great opportunity, but also profound challenges for all of us. Our defense, our financial systems, and our infrastructure are all under daily attack. Earlier, John, he was right when he said that we shouldn't allow China into our telecom infrastructure, just like we don't allow them into our defense. And earlier today, the Honorable Andreas Frank, he stated that the rules-based world order is over. Indeed, I do believe that the world order and structure that was ushered in after World War II has frayed to the point of repair and reorganization and potential reorder. And let me start off by saying also that in his recent book, Thank You for Being Late, Thomas Friedman writes about computing power and technology. And he describes the world's most powerful supercomputer that was made by the United States for $50 million in 1999. If you fast forward to just 2006, that same computing power was found in a Sony PlayStation video game. Think about that for a second. Everyone in this room has the same computing power at your fingertips as the strongest nation did just over 20 years ago. And if policymakers and industry and law enforcement are not thinking of how that affects their world, then they are already behind. Our country's policymakers, with help from experts, agencies, and others, must craft laws to fight cybercrime, not simply for theft or money laundering, although I do agree with Senator Cassidy today that money laundering should be considered a national security threat, and that stopping financing for such activities it's a vulnerable point that we should exploit. But we also have to pass functional laws that restrain actions even from our own citizens, which may not be constrained by borders. Consider that it wasn't too long ago where online nationalists from Chile and Peru were attacking each other's government websites. These types of acts could spiral out of control into physical war. Internationally, my country, or your country, and all of the world, the democratic world especially, must come together to create international cyber doctrine with agreed upon framework and definitions of what constitutes an act of war or an act of aggression in cyberspace. For far too long, in a world that moves faster than ever before, democratic nations around the world have not put forth policy for cyberspace. We must tell bad actors what lines they shall not cross. We're in a whole new, faster world, but I'm reminded by the old words of President John F. Kennedy of yesterday as he was speaking to a graduating class at West Point Military Academy in 1962. But his words hold new meaning in the cyber realm of today. What he told them was, this is another type of war, new in its intensity, ancient in its origin. War by guerrillas, subversives, insurgents, assassins. War by ambush instead of conflict, by infiltration instead of aggression. Seeking victory by eroding and exhausting the enemy instead of engaging him. That's exactly what is happening in our countries, in our critical infrastructure, in our defense systems, in our financial systems every single day. It's not going to be easy to craft international cyber doctrine. It's going to be more complicated than the challenges that our forefathers had when they came together to write the rules on nuclear proliferation, which is still not perfect. But a tough challenge is not an excuse for inaction. A world without rules doesn't have to be the rule itself. America and other countries, many of whom are represented here today, need to work together with all of our allies to promote democratic principles and freedom across the internet and across the physical world. Thank you, God bless you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Outstanding, Congressman. Thank you so much. We will now hear from Ms. Victoria Beckman virtually. She's the Director of Digital Crimes Unit at Microsoft. So, Ms. Beckman, if you could please join us.
Thank you. Buenas tardes a todos.
Thank you very much. My name is Victoria Beckman, as they said. And I'm going to speak in English just because the rest of the panel is speaking English.
My name is Victoria Beckman. I'm the director of the Digital Crimes Unit at Microsoft for the region of the Americas, and I also lead the Critical Infrastructure Group for Latin America. And my presentation today is just going to be based on some of the work that we're doing, recognizing the importance of cybersecurity at Microsoft in the region. Let me start with some very basic numbers that we're probably all very familiar with, but in the last year, we have seen an increase on attacks and cyber attacks, especially some of them taking advantage of the pandemic. Some of them also taking advantage of the fact that we are going through election cycles in South America. And we have seen an increase in the percentage of people that are being victims of phishing attacks and social engineering attacks. There, according to studies that have done the Ponemon Institute together with IBM, there is approximately 90 days between the time that there is an attack and the time that an organization recognizes that they have been subjected to an attack. 90 days is a long time, and it could cause a lot of issues, not only economic issues, reputational issues, legal issues, but in the long run, it could be something that wasn't discovered, that wasn't handled the right way. We have statistics of 24 to 48 hours for an attacker to have complete control of a network. And as we have seen lately, there have been also an increase in attacks to critical infrastructure, including water supply plants, oil plants, including also beef manufacturing or processing plants. The cost of a cyber attack, the average cost of a cyber attack, and this is in US dollars, is about $4 million, which could be something that an organization could afford if it's an organization the size maybe of Microsoft or some of other companies. But for a small or medium organization, this could be the end of their existence. And the statistic, an $8 trillion spent to fight cybercrime, and that cost to the global economy in general, resulting in victims and loss of business, having to update systems and things of that nature. So what are we doing to help with this? Well, Microsoft created the Cybercrime Center, was built in about 2013. And this is a place where we all work. Is kind of a collaboration between the public sector to try to bring together technical and legal experts to fight against cybercrime. So in my unit, my team, the Digital Crimes Unit, our mission is to lead the fight against cybercrime, to protect our customers and to promote global trust in Microsoft. And we're doing that through technology, including artificial intelligence and machine learning to follow trends and discover bad actors. We're using for digital forensics. We're using creative legal strategies, as was mentioned. There are a lot of countries that don't have legislation covering this kind of attacks or these kind of crimes yet. So we're trying to come up with different theories, different ways to maybe go after these perpetrators and to try to stop cyber criminals. We also work with criminal referrals to law enforcement throughout the region, including criminal referrals in cases of online child exploitation. And we have public and private partnerships with governments, with companies across the Americas to try to have our efforts combined and work together against cybercrime. We work with security and privacy, and this also includes legislation. And with a big component is education and awareness throughout the region, as well as working with policy and trying to generate these ideas to have laws that are evolving at the same rate that the technology is evolving. So our main programs in terms of disruption and what the DCU center does, and by the way, once this COVID and the whole pandemic restrictions are over, I hope to welcome some of you in person to visit our lab and our facilities. But we have initiatives to combat malware. We do takedowns of botnets. We do, especially in big countries like Brazil, Mexico, we have constant operations to try to combat this malware, as well as ransomware. We have seen an increase in ransomware and ransomware targeting critical infrastructure of countries. We also work with combating business email compromise, which is together with payment disruption, affects the financial industry mainly, and the professional services industry, with any malicious use of Azure or the cloud to commit these kinds of crimes. Technical support fraud, which is also contacting somebody pretending to be Microsoft, Apple, Google to provide support. And then business operation integrity, that again includes strategic enforcements of IP, but also supply chain integrity, and most importantly, customer engagements, including policy and work with different governmental entities, different governments, trying to share information and come up with solutions and even model laws and things of that nature to work together. I'm going to do a very, very quick run of how these programs work to give time to my co-panelists. But some of the key ones, and the ones that are affecting the financial and the critical infrastructure areas, are the business email compromise. We're trying to disrupt, deter, strengthen, and communicate, meaning that we are trying to look ahead of time for this, for who are the attackers, what are they doing, what kind of, we're doing entire operations trying to get to this to these attackers and disrupt them before they can continue doing what they're doing. We work in collaboration with different entities, including Europol, Interpol, FBI. We have done, in the past year, we have referred these bad actors to the authorities, and it has resulted in arrest of cyber attackers, disrupt and recovery of some amounts that were returned to the victims. There were arrests overseas, not only in the United States, but in Europe, and we haven't done one yet in Latin America, but it's coming. And we also have worked pretty hard concentrating on malware cases. These malware cases include the spam. It also includes ransomware. And again, same thing, we're trying to provide authorities and to work together with authorities to give them the information, the evidence that they need to work these cases and to hopefully stop, deter, and prosecute cyber attackers. Just an overview of different malware disruption operations that we have done throughout the year that have resulted in successful disruption and closing down of big nets of cyber attackers, some of them located overseas, that we have collaborated so that we can actually have this impact across jurisdictions. We also have worked with the Cyber Threat Intelligence Program. There are multiple companies throughout North, Central, and South America that are cooperating with us, that have signed these kinds of agreements. These agreements are basically an agreement to share information about threats, about vulnerabilities, about what we're doing, how we're disrupting this, and same from the side of the companies, the private companies, so that we can hopefully have this network that is working together to disrupt these attacks. As I mentioned, we also work on tech support fraud, and mostly awareness campaigns and education of users as to what this is, how they're proliferating, how depending on the situation going around in the country, the political situation, COVID, they're taking advantage and doing the scams. And as I mentioned, same enforcement and deterrence and referrals to law enforcement. And those are basically what our program basically. As I mentioned, also we work together with different countries in promoting policy that addresses cybersecurity, that addresses education in cybersecurity, building of critical skills and capabilities building. And here's my information. If anyone has any questions in English or Spanish, feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beckman. Appreciate you being with us today virtually. They're not allowed to fly with Microsoft yet. Mr. Surjeet Mahant, he's Managing Director of K2 Integrity and the Head of Cyber Risk Management Services. Thank you, sir. We look forward to hearing your remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank Congressman Pittenger for having me here. Thank you to Alejo Campos for an excellent reception. And it's a pleasure to be here and speaking on the back of such eminent dignitaries and esteemed panelists. I'm here to present on the back of what my panelists before me said, more of a practical, pragmatic, and a practitioner's approach to cybersecurity. So as a part of my work, I reach out to public and private sectors equally and understand the issues that concern them most in the cybersecurity area and areas of risk. And one of the things that we have noticed overwhelmingly is the quantification of risk, the understanding and appreciation of what risk really means, how that gets translated in a cyber focus, and therefore, what is the required effort to go behind it and in fact address it. And most of the organizations generally struggle with being able to understand what is the gravity of the risk in terms of the cost of remediation versus doing nothing. But when it concerns national security, doing nothing is obviously not an option. Even otherwise, in the private sector, for example, doing nothing could very well be the difference between staying in business or shutting down. I very much compare that to the vaccination and the pandemic, and you'll probably hear a lot of analogy in my next couple of minutes of dialogue. When it comes to the pandemic, it's almost like the vaccination. You have a choice to take it for whatever protection it can offer, or do nothing, which is really expose yourself. In terms of the domains that some of the people before me have spoken about, we really look at it from three perspectives: the external threats, the internal threats, and the systems themselves, right? So it seems to form somewhat of a trinity of sorts. When you talk about external, internal, and systems, you talk about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You talk about people, process, and technology. And the trend there is it almost seems bucketed in certain ways. And one of the major challenges that the world is facing today, in terms of being able to address these risks, is the silo nature of looking at it. There is a theme developing here in the conversation about building bridges, transparency, sharing information, collaboration, which is fundamentally so important because the technology is there. Like the panelists before me, Scott mentioned, we all have the power in our hands in terms of the technology and the speed and the processing aspect of it. The information is out there. So how do you connect the dots? And what are those dots that need to be connected? Risk assessment, I feel, is underrated in certain ways, and it needs to be evaluated in a much more deeper manner. The guidance that has been put out there from several organizations internationally is excellent guardrails to stay within and address it, but you cannot mistake compliance for protection. Protection certainly has to go deeper than just compliance. And I feel that these silos that have built over time in terms of the departments not having the ability or the vision or just not having enough bandwidth to be able to share the information is going to be critical to how it plays into the overall approach and how far-reaching the effort to mitigate and remediate those risks is concerned. Being here in Panama and looking at the Panamanian, the Panama Canal, it kind of gives me the thought of bridging that gap, bridging the gaps between these silos. A fraud team in an organization needs to be talking to the cybersecurity team, and maybe in the quest of explaining this, I'm kind of venting a little bit, so you'll have to excuse me on that. But these are the tactical problems that a practitioner faces, and I think there is enough gravitas in this room to be able to change those things, to be able to get the visibility that is required, the appreciation, like I said, for the areas that need to be addressed. In terms of, again, using another analogy of the pandemic, over the last 2 years we have grown to sanitize everything that we see within reach, and it has to be taken down to the third-party vendor risk management program, for example. The riskiest aspect of the enterprise is at times, and it's proven statistically, it lies mostly with the endpoints, the connections that you have to the outside world. And they are either your vendors that you deal with. We spoke about China, and we talked about buying equipment and all of those things. But it doesn't even have to go that far. On a day-to-day basis, any given organization has hundreds and thousands of vendors that they deal with, and those could very well be your weakest link. The vetting process for vendor management, the vetting process from a cybersecurity perspective, particularly the due diligence that needs to be done, has to be an extremely important aspect of how cybersecurity is being addressed. Today, with the work from home situation, I think the attack surface for cyber has grown exponentially. And the digitization, as expeditiously as it has happened, it has opened up tremendous amount of volume to be protected. Every endpoint is connected. Lateral movement, as we call it in our lingo, is essentially exposing every device, not just your home, not just your network that you work on internally, but externally exposing your organization just by virtue of having that capability of being able to connect from wherever and getting onto the corporate network or enterprise network. And when you are a public service employee, you can just magnify that multifold. The other aspect that I think is critical in the effort to strengthen cybersecurity is a culture of compliance. And by the culture of compliance, I mean more so in terms of awareness. And the awareness needs to be taken down to the individuals. Every single person needs to be aware of what cybersecurity means, what risk there is in being able to expose yourself, put yourself out there, whether it's the social media, whether it's Facebook, Insta, Twitter, or what have you. We have grown, and generations to come are going to be native to this technology. I would urge my esteemed people that are in positions of power to even think as far as having cyber security as a part of the curriculum. Because if a 2-year-old is out there browsing cartoons, that is eventually a threat to national security in some ways, if you think about it, because there is a certain amount of exposure that everyone is carrying with them. It is extremely important to look at the ground reality of what we are dealing with. The ransomwares of the world, the business email compromises, the corporate espionage, and the state actors behind it are doing much more sophisticated work at a very, very grassroots level. And to be able to tackle that, we have to apply every technique that's in the book. And I don't believe, or rather, I do believe very strongly in the technology capabilities that are out there, like the person from Microsoft just mentioned. Every organization is doing tremendous amount of work in cybersecurity to help us protect ourselves, protect the environment, protect our organizations, and eventually protect our country at large and the world. And we all need to take that into account. One of the things in terms of the expeditious nature of digitization is the fact that there is a misnomer about the cloud. It is the fastest and easiest way to upload your pictures or take your organization from a server under your desk to something that is much more connectable internationally from anywhere and just have things in the cloud. And it is almost, an assumption that once you're in the cloud, it is the responsibility of the cloud provider, like a Microsoft or an AWS or someone else, Google for that matter. And to some degree, there is inherent protection, but there is more that needs to be done. And just like, if you're sick, there's no shame in going to a doctor. There's no shame in being able to assess yourself, in being able to do a penetration test, for example, on the organizations, to expose the vulnerabilities that might be there, to expose any weak points that might be there in the organization, to be able to then successfully address them and create a solid, foolproof environment. And I don't think it's difficult to achieve. The only difference is that it's not a one-time aspect. It's a continuous journey that needs to be taken into account. It needs to be updated. It needs to be upgraded. And 90% of cyber risks for the enterprise can be resolved with very little effort, but a dedicated attention and a continuous effort to be able to mitigate everything that's within reach. The anomaly detection, the transaction monitoring, things that came up during the course of this discussion are extremely important and extremely achievable at the same time. Data, which is the holy grail of everything, a lot of times, the first question that I end up asking the people I work with, the organizations that I come across, is, do you know where your data is? And the question, unfortunately, is not an overwhelming yes. Knowing where that data is within the infrastructure, knowing where those pockets of information are, knowing what is sensitive, being able to classify and therefore protect them adequately, I feel is extremely important. These are all the proactive aspects of it. Incident response these days is getting better. What we saw with the pipeline situation and the fact that there is recoverability even with the ransomware payments is very encouraging. And I think with the effort, with the joint effort of the public-private sector, with the ability to collaborate, with the ability to share information, meaningful information, that is really going to help across the board, all avenues and all areas, all sectors, regardless, to make this world a better place. I strongly believe that we can achieve it, and I think, this is a great forum. Once again, thank you, Congressman, for having me here, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, caballeros.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Any questions?
Question for my colleague Marco Zanni. Buongiorno Marco, sono Andy Grossaro, sono dalla Romania. I'm a representative of the Italian community in Romania, and for me it was a very real pleasure to work together with my Italian co-nationals to establish this cybersecurity center of European Union in Romania. The question is, how do you see the actual implementation of the project of European Council, the principal ones only, until 2023? And how do you prepare and how do you embrace the adaptation to the unique digital market? How do you see this construction?
Can I take this one? Yeah, for sure. So, thank you very much for your question. Very briefly, as I explained, the cybersecurity is a fundamental issue, not only for our member states, and I'm happy that you experienced it, a very nice cooperation with my fellows Italians cooperating with you. And as I said, regarding the cybersecurity issue at the European level, I think that there are three main aspects where we should focus our efforts in order to be successful in protecting our European security and our national interest. The first one, and you made a great example of this, is cooperation and coordination. This is not an issue that we can solve alone, as I said. So cooperation and coordination is fundamental. And was clear also in this panel that it's not just public authorities or nations coordinations, but we need corporations and public authorities cooperating together to strengthen our efforts on cyber security. The second issue, as I pointed out in my speech, or the second point that we will try to address with the European Recovery Fund is investments. Without investment, and again, public and private partnership, we will not be able to tackle this challenge. And the third point is data sharing and cooperation also in this field. We are trying to do this at the European Union level, strengthening our agencies and also the communication between our national agencies dealing with cybersecurity. But this is not easy since resources for those agencies are limited. And we know that other hostile states and organizations are investing deeply in using day-by-day cyber attacks as a warfare tool. So those are the three ways I see we can strengthen our efforts on cybersecurity.
Thank you very much. And another question is for Mr. Surjeet Mahant. Is not a question, is a confirmation of what you said. We have to develop a culture of compliance. So, to face the cyber threats and cyber attacks, I can say that in the base of the Romanian constitution, we are a step ahead because our constitution already mentioned the possibility of every people to address petitions to the authorities. So, from this point of view, we are prepared. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. ¿Alguien más?
Thank you very much. Any further questions?
Other question? Or Victoria, are you online? I think so. If you want to make any comments, you are welcome.
Thank you. I'm online, but I can answer any questions anyone has.
Yes, if you allow me to clear up my point. In the countries of Latin America, specifically my country, there are so many transnational companies, and they are doing very important works of infrastructure. Each company will bring in their own technology. And it was mentioned today in regards to the Prague Agreement. So, meaning that it really depends of the governments. But I would like to know if somebody can touch on that point.
International companies working in Peru right now, and maybe they are bringing their own technologies to the country and maybe without controls. Or thank you.
I don't know the situation in Peru. I don't have many information, but I can tell you what my country, what my continent, what the European Union is trying to do to get a sort of control on corporations or suppliers of strategic technologies to strategic and critical infrastructures. So at the national level, we have deployed two instruments to control this. The first one is golden power. So the government is able to screen and to check who is going to do, especially foreign companies or state-owned foreign companies, third country companies that are trying to target critical infrastructure in terms of M&A or also in terms of supply technologies. And this is a tool that we have. The second one is investment screening tools. So the government has also powers to check and to block operations that are considered a threat to national security. So I think that this could be a good way also for your country to have sort of great coverage of who is behind critical investment and critical infrastructures for the country. And we are also deploying or trying to deploy those instruments at the European level. The European Commission started working on mechanism to screen third countries' investment, and this is clearly targeting Chinese investment that skyrocketed in the past years in the most important EU countries, so UK, Germany, France, and Italy, basically. We had billions of Chinese investment in critical infrastructures, critical technologies, and critical companies. We didn't have at that time those kind of instruments. We are trying to build it in order to have more powers to protect our national security.
Thank you, Marco.
Just a quick follow-up on that. I think it's important as someone who is a legislator for my state and then for my state for the country to create, for policymakers to create some sort of framework that goes into procurement, right? So that's in the law that you understand what technologies they're bringing or who's investing what. And I know it was said earlier today, I think it was Mr. Strand that spoke about that countries need to be able to have choice in suppliers, right? So I think it's important for your lawmakers to create law that gives that framework and commands any procurement that you understand, and there's transparency in procurement processes for anything in your critical infrastructure, for certain.
Thank you. Surjeet?
Yeah, just to add to what Marco and Scott said here, I would look at it twofold. One is the investment aspect of it, and one of the panelists before me mentioned the CFIUS that's working in the US. That regulation controls the investment and also goes after the disintegration part to ensure that your assets and critical information, which is called the protected data in that regulation, stays protected and stays within the boundaries of Peru in this case, I would imagine. So that's as far as the investment aspect is concerned. As far as the vendor relationship is concerned in terms of them bringing the technology and deploying the technology, the government should certainly look at a much stronger due diligence aspect of it and a risk evaluation of what is at stake, and that you can control, how far-reaching that can be in terms of who is behind it from an investment perspective, from an ownership perspective, and then, based on a risk rating, deal with it that is appropriate within your risk appetite.
Thank you, Surjeet. I think we have time for the last question, maybe in the middle of the room. Please.
Giovanni Ferrari, Cologne Free Zone General Manager. We have spoken quite a bit about the cybersecurity. Panama has had a number of attacks on companies with ransomware, not to speak of the multiple ones that occur at a consumer level. My question is the following: how do we go about addressing this issue? Somebody used the word warfare. This could be something that has a wider ranging importance, not only what happens to a specific country. Here in Panama, there are laws. There is a DA for cybernetic crimes, but besides that, there is very, very little help. Are we going to handle this at a continental level so that we are not reactive but actually preventive? And which would be the proper entity to coordinate these efforts at a continental level? Would that be an organization like the OAS, similar to what perhaps the European Union has? And how do we go about making this happen? Thank you.
Hello. I think that was probably me who spoke about acts of aggression, acts of war in cyberspace. Let's be real. You're not going to be able to stop everything, right? Whether it's cybercrime or physical crime, you can't stop everything, right? But it is a massive problem and a growing, increasing problem here, not just in Panama, but also throughout Latin America and the world, quite frankly. I'm a very big advocate. In fact, I introduced legislation several years ago that came up with doctrine to define active aggression, active war in cyberspace, and clearly you need to have some kind of delineation between what's just a theft or money laundering or crime, as opposed to a nation state actor or a transnational terrorist group or something. There's obviously a bit of a difference there. I'm certain that the United States is helpful in many respects with other countries. I know they are, with expertise in cyber and helping. But I do think that you're correct. I think that you mentioned OAS, and I think that's a fantastic organization or at least to start to have cooperation in cyber and capabilities that the United States can also liaise with to help in bringing to justice some of these criminal actors, quite frankly. But I think that's a good start. That can at least, because there's organizing of the states, of course, from down here, coupled with some cooperation and expertise from the United States. I think that would be a great start.
Muchas gracias, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
And for sharing your time and experience. Muchas gracias. Aplauso, por favor.
A round of applause, please. Thank you. I'll take away what Marco said of sharing real cooperation and to share among countries. But real cooperation. For those of us that work in many different countries, sharing information, sometimes it is very complex.